Good morning, everybody. We welcome you to the 6th Annual Secure IT Conference. Today, when India is moving towards Digital India, and today when modern technology is being adopted in all the spheres, whether it is governance, defense, policing, then the system becomes more vulnerable for security issues. And at these times, when security is a very important issue, the discussion, we are looking forward for good rounds of discussion throughout the day in this conference. This conference will cover a range of issues regarding cybersecurity, public safety and security, infrastructure security, border management, data security, issues of cybercrime, and so many pressing issues today concerned with security in the nation. So, to start with the inaugural session, I will invite our honorable guest for the inaugural session, which is focusing on changing times and securing India. I would like to invite our chief guest of the day, Mr. Ram Sevak Sharma, Secretary, Department of Electronics and IT, Ministry of Communications and IT, Government of India. Please welcome him with a round of applause. I request Shri R. Chandrasekhar, President NASSCOM, to please join us on stage. I request Mr. Shambhu Singh, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, to please join us on the stage. Please welcome our guest with a round of applause. I request all of you. I invite Mr. Banshidhar Sharma, Director General, Sashastra Seema Bal, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. I also invite, we also welcome Dr. M.P. Narayanan, President, Elect Techno Media Private Limited, in the 6th Annual Secure IT. I request you to welcome him also with a round of applause. With this now, I request Dr. Ravi Gupta, Editor-in-Chief, eGov Magazine and CEO, Elect Techno Media, to present bouquets to our guests for the day. To continue with the inaugural session, I'll request Dr. Gupta for an introductory address.
Welcome, friends. It is an honor for all of us to have you all with us at this annual Security Conference. And as you are already aware, we are focusing on the pressing challenges of cyber security and also with the IT in defense, IT in our home department, and IT in our police forces. So looking at these two completely different but totally interlinked areas of security is the whole focus of Security event. So we have a very, very distinguished panel in the inauguration here, as you are already seeing. And our chief guest of the day, Shri Ram Sevak Sharma ji, is already here, who is Secretary IT, and you are all aware that there is a parliament session going on. So without much ado, I will like to invite him. And before I do that, I invite our President, Dr. M.P. Narayanan, to do a welcome of the guests, and then we will have address of our chief guest of the session. Sir.
Distinguished luminaries on the dais and delegates to this all-important conference. This is the 6th time we are hosting this secure IT conference. It is needless to point out that a secure nation must ensure safety of citizens and security of critical infrastructure. I am confident that during the deliberations today, we have a cross-section of personalities present here, the policy makers of the government, the industry, the academics, everybody is there. And I'm sure the issues concerning the various aspects will be discussed thoroughly and will come to some sort of a conclusion. This National Conference on Information, Safety and Citizen Security is being organized for the 6th time. I'm happy to mention by the ELETS and the eGov magazine. Looking forward to a very successful deliberation, and I once again extend a very hearty welcome to the dignitaries on the stage, and you have personalities like Mr. Sharma, Mr. Chandrasekhar, Mr. Sambhu Singh, etc., and from the Shastra, you who have been personally associated with us. I am personally grateful to them for having developed all interest in this particular subject. And once again, a hearty welcome to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Narayanan. Now, without any delay, I invite Shri Ram Sevak Sharma to please address us. Please welcome him with a round of applause. Sir.
Morning, friends. Dr. M.P. Narayanan, Mr. Chandrasekhar, Sambhu Singh ji, Mr. Sharma, all our friends. It is indeed very appropriate that ELETS and the eGov magazine are organizing this conference on secure IT and to deliberate on the issue as to how we secure our infrastructure, how we secure our cyberspace, how we secure our applications. It's very, very relevant. See, the more we get connected, the more vulnerable we become from the cyber threats. If it was all islands of, computers, each doing its own things, then because they were not connected, so therefore there would have been much less threat. The threat would have certainly existed, but only from the persons who are using those systems. But now everything is connected, therefore it becomes very, very important. And the connectivity is not only extending to things which are normally, innocuous in nature. Critical infrastructure of our country is connected now. The railways are connected, the civil aviation is connected, so everything is connected. And irrespective of the fact, even the oil drills, for example, in the offshore, whatever we are doing, that's all now more and more of IT is going into these kinds of systems and processes and things. So therefore, it becomes very, very important because banking, for example. Now banking is one of the most critical infrastructures. Now banking is every individual, every person who has an account is able to do banking through the internet. And therefore the only way for the banks is while they have the core banking system, there is also a need to expose that system to outside world so that everybody is able to do transactions. Now if everybody is able to do transactions, obviously this system becomes open to that extent. And if there is a, let's say, threat, if somebody can just attack that system, and somebody can attack the system so that the whole thing breaks down or the whole thing just comes down, then you can imagine if the entire banking infrastructure comes down, what will happen. So today, initially when it all started on the cyber threats, it was just some people were hacking systems just to prove that they could get into the systems. There was no motivation as such. The motivation was merely a thrill that I have get into NASA systems or I got into the SBI system. Thereafter, people started doing economic crimes. They started, sort of stealing the passwords and usernames and somehow, do some financial kind of crimes. So that was another stage. And of course, then the system, people started breaking down the system just to, espionage kind of applications where people were trying to steal information. So people will go into Pentagon website and they find out the secret there. That's the third stage. And today we have a real cyber warfare stage where people are doing it just to, and there are countries who are training people in this area. And there are thousands of professionals who are being trained to do cyber attacks. So this has become actually, in some sense, a state policy. People may say that terrorism is not a state policy, but cyber attacks and cyber warfare is becoming a very powerful instrument of state policy for some countries. So therefore, the whole scenario is really pretty grim in the sense of threats. Now the only thing is you can't cannot say that no, I will close down my systems. Closing down the system is not a solution to this problem. Because, one can always say that the best place for a ship to be is in the, whatever, Bandargah uska hota hai. This is the best place safest place for the ship, but then the ship has to go. And therefore it has to be there and in the sea and has to face all the threats. And therefore, I think what we need to do, we have to be ahead of the curve to see that we have all these systems, the best security systems which are available in the world, best practices which we do, and so that we are able to secure our infrastructure and our resources and assets. This is very important. Unfortunately, we have been believing that whatever I'm doing is okay, safe, why should anybody try to attack it? And therefore we find that the systems are developed without specific, protection of these systems from the vulnerabilities. And people say because nobody knows how the systems are developed and therefore it is secure. So we try to, have security to obscurity. Now that is not really a strategy. That is not something good which you should be doing. We have to, and therefore we are coming out with a policy saying that the systems must be secure, but we will also have open source kind of stuff. Even the software which are proprietary and which are in some kind of proprietary language, we say we'll open them. So let these softwares be, their bugs be found out, so that it is not security through obscurity, but security through this kind of sturdy nature. And as you know, all the operating systems and all the systems which are in open source are much more secure than the systems which are, closely done and then some vulnerabilities are found and nobody knows about these vulnerabilities and vulnerabilities are extracted. So that actually has to change. What we are doing at the Government of India level is we have said no software which is not certified for security. The basic, the basic coding, the basic way it should be done, it has to be a secure and safe system. Secure and safe not only from the outside threat, but its own. It should not actually become insecure in its own design. So that's one thing. We are creating, institutions which at the national level will ensure that we have those, our infrastructures are secure. So we are creating what is called National Cyber Coordination Center. That is a part of the Digital India program. In fact, one of the attributes or one of the statements of Digital India, powerful statement, is we must have a safe and secure cyberspace in the country. And that will happen only when we have, we have to be ahead of the curve. We have to have very proactive steps we should take to secure our infrastructure. So we are having this National Cyber Coordination Center. We also are putting up what is called the malware and botnet cleaning systems. So we will run this system against all our critical infrastructure and other systems of the government to ensure that they are able to clean the malware and those other kinds of systems. We are going to have a safe and secure email. So while we will have to continue our journey towards Digital India, digitizing the entire workflow in the country, digitizing all the documents in the country, our initiatives of electronic signatures on demand, Aadhaar infrastructure, bank accounts, all those things will continue to go on. We will be very, very clear in our approach that all these steps or all these things which are being done are safe and secure. So this is very, very important, and we are fully conscious of the need to have security. However, there is a larger need for people becoming aware of this security threats. Unfortunately, the awareness is lacking, and therefore we have a program, Information Security Awareness Program. That program is running, and we are running this program in the schools and institutions where we are giving absolute modules of these courses as to what are the safety measures which one should take to ensure that our country remains safe and secure from the cyber attacks and security threats. We have also, from this perspective, started a program called Secure Your PC. That is a website, the portal, which actually enables you can just plug in your PC, connect the PC, and then this will do a scanning and do threat testing. That is another program which we are doing. The whole idea is, and even all those softwares which are in capacity building of our own people, so that when they write software, they write a safe software, they write a secure software. That's another program. So we are certainly trying to be ahead of the curve, trying to ensure that we have integrated detection systems, we have integrated prevention systems, we monitor the network for any illegal activities. So all those, sort of a lot of things are going on. Nevertheless, the need to remain ever vigilant, because security is something which cannot be sort of, write a software and it's all prevented. The other day, in fact, the Prime Minister was telling in NASSCOM, he emphasized the fact that the cyber security is one of the most important areas which is going to come up in tomorrow's world. And therefore, if somebody could kind of develop some systems which could say that now your systems are safe and you can sleep peacefully, that will be certainly a very ideal situation. But that ideal situation is really difficult to achieve, because the threats are also continuously developing, evolving, and therefore one cannot have a permanent solution, so to say, for this. But nevertheless, the combination of things, certainly we should work in this area. There are many countries in the world. Israel, for example, has worked hugely in this cyber security area, and I think we need to learn from them. We need to also develop our internal capacities, and I think there should be some courses also, the computer science programs. If I remember, I also did my computer science about 12 years back, not long ago, and I found that the only course which we had was cryptography. So cryptography is only the sort of course which was introduced in the master's program. So now I think there is a need to have much more courses also which should deal with the latest techniques, latest threat kind of things. So there also there is a need. So there is a need to educate the academic world, sort of create new courseware. There is a need to have such conferences which actually deliberate on the issue of cyber security, especially the defense area and the policing area, because these are our critical kind of infrastructures, and there we need to really ensure that we are fully. Many times people think that whatever we have done, our old mindsets are also very, very responsible for these kinds of things. In our old mindset, what is the security? Security is 20 policemen arrayed in one line. That's security. But then we forget electrons don't really look at these policemen. Electrons just move away without even telling anybody as to what they're going to do. And therefore, we have to change that mindset also. We have to be aware. In fact, one of my professors, he was a security person, and he used to tell me that today there were 180 attacks on the system. And this is, I'm talking about 12 years back. Attacks, intrusion attacks on the system. So once you start detecting these things, once you start put some systems which will find out whether there are attempts taking place, you will find that it's not a calm and peaceful world. It may appear from outside, but inside there are these routers and the systems and the bandwidth things, optical fibers, lot of stuff and lot of threatening stuff is going on, and therefore we need to be continuously alert to that position. I think Ravi and Dr. Narayan and all these people of Village Media and EGA have done a wonderful job. And as Dr. Narayan was saying, it is the sixth conference in the series, and I think more and more such conferences must take place, which should make people aware. And not only aware, but also the professionals must become much more attuned to the latest sort of techniques and security things. I wish all this the very best to this conference, and I'm sure the deliberations which will take place will really pave the way for a better and secure India. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your vision to have a safe and secure cyber system in the country, and for telling us that you may not find criminals on roads, but you may find them in the electrons. So thank you very much for your inspiring address. And I now request Honorable Chief Guest and all guest of honors to launch the special issue of eGov magazine on security. We have tried to cover a wide range of stakeholders in the IT security space, including the leaders from government as well as from industry. in this magazine. Thank you very much, sir. And now we move on to our next speaker for today's inaugural session. I invite Mr. Banshidhar Sharma, Director General, Sashastra Seema Bal, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, for an address, sir.
A very good morning to all the dignitaries present on the podium and in the audience. Jungle mein mor nacha kisne dekha. First, we had information. Information collected by human resources was entered into a multitude of registers at the police stations. I'm talking as a police officer and an officer of the border guarding force. We also had communication, because obviously information restricted to one police station would not help in crime prevention and detection if it were not shared. So we had runners literally to run from one place to another with this information. But we did not have technology, and therefore the information did get communicated, but at its own pace. In due course, we got wired and wireless communication. With technology, prompt transmission became possible, and more importantly, analysis now became possible. I had the Sashastra Seema Bal, a border guarding force deployed on the 2,450 kilometers long Indo-Nepal and Indo-Bhutan borders. SSB is also the lead intelligence agency on these two borders. Our inception as the Special Service Bureau goes back to 1963 in the wake of the Indo-China conflict, with the primary objective of inculcating a sense of belonging amongst the border population with the motto, which is our motto now, Seva, Suraksha, Bandhutva. We are around 80,000 strong today, and will be about a little more than 1 lakh at the end of our raisings in 2018. In addition to border guarding, we are also deployed on counterinsurgency duties in Jammu and Kashmir, Assam, and LWE areas of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Bihar. In the days of the Mahabharata, there was Sanjay to do real-time reporting to the blind king Dhritarashtra. And there was Lord Krishna, who was the repository of information, did collation, assimilation, analysis, and finally made decisions for Arjuna to act with promptness and precision. On an open and porous border with our friendly countries, Nepal and Bhutan, where diplomacy is at its sensitive best, I, with my eyes thankfully intact, expect to know as to what is happening on the border almost as it is happening. In the age of Google Glass, VR headsets, smartphones, and smartwatches, and what have you, I expect my man on the border to not only be smart, but also smartly equipped with the various ICT tools to give a real-time account of the situation. Crime has become very sophisticated as some criminals make use of the very latest technology. To handle this, the police have developed equally sophisticated methods of crime detection and prevention. Legislation has also been updated to allow the police to gather evidence on criminal activity carried out via the internet, for example. Information is the key word in crime detection, and this information must be accurate and easily available. ICT has a huge role to play in this. As India transitions into the new world economy, a number of factors are operating to make traditional ways of policing obsolete. In addition to traditional societal problems like crime, mob violence, civil disturbances, terrorism, insurgency, etc., new forms like cybercrime, internationally funded terrorism spanning continents, international crime syndicates, etc., are emerging. Criminals are one step ahead of the police in making use of the latest technology, including ICTs, in implementing their nefarious designs. This makes it necessary that the police should also evolve to keep pace with the changing times. Modern society is characterized by sudden growth and development of information technology, resulting in large dependence of the society, in a wider sense, on the individual knowledge and competence of a person in the IT area. Today, being a computer illiterate person means to be a person who is unable to participate in modern society, a person without opportunity. Today, it is common to use the term information and communication technology because it is unimaginable to work on a computer which is not connected to the network. Life today without email, e-commerce, online banking, e-government, online shopping, e-learning, or even social media networking is perhaps no longer an option. Policing is a highly complex, information-led activity that requires the integration of multiple data sources, often in short time frames. The sensitive nature of most information and the severe consequences of possible errors further increase the relevance of adequate design and use of ICT. ICT systems present an opportunity for police forces to increase their capabilities. ICT concepts, architecture and design have matured significantly and are subject to continuous innovation. Relevant ICT may range from systems installed in public environments over PC-based systems in offices to systems installed at border checkposts, in the cars, and mobile systems used on-site. In addition to systems that are specifically designed for the police, ICT in use by the general public may offer the police new means of dealing with the task. Emerging ICTs and their appropriation by society may also constitute a threat that demands new competencies and practices to be developed and integrated in existing police work. This cuts both ways. Should the focus be on quality of data and swift dissemination of data, or on security of data? The dilemma between LAN or WAN and internet will remain. Offenders could use systems directly against the police or against the general public. The extended use of ICT turns out to be much more than just a technical innovation to to make police work easier and more efficient. Technological innovations change the organization and its environment in various ways. ICT in the police is closely regulated by laws, yet may go way beyond what is allowed for the normal citizen. The introduction of information and communication technologies is rapidly changing the way of public interaction, not only with each other, but also with private business and government institutions. ICT can play a major role in providing easy and timely access to information, storage and processing of large volumes of data, intelligence and investigative analytics, like illegal crossings, human trafficking, seizure of narcotics, contraband, arms and ammunition, apprehension of criminals and anti-national elements, etc., and many other kinds of relevant data for effective and efficient border management. ICT has great potential to achieve good governance goals. Today, the force, my force I'm talking of, faces increasing pressure from all stakeholders, not only from the public and media, for better border governance, but also from its employees for efficient working and service conditions. Operational planning, human resources management, financial management, inventory management, e-documents and workflow management systems with system of central monitoring and control at all levels would bring efficiency, transparency and effectiveness in the functioning. Integrated information system, online database would complement secure identity documents like Aadhaar card, driving license, passport, PAN, biometrics, etc. and give the added advantage of identifying and taking lawful measures against criminals by law enforcement agencies. It would also promote technical development and interaction between stakeholders needed for effective sharing of information and identifying of risks. ICT tools like CCTV, GIS, GPS, etc. can be utilized in disseminating and sharing of real-time information in order to take quick and timely decisions with the forces, especially forward troops. Dynamic information on geographic and social environment will assist in effective performance of duties. Similarly, data intelligence tools and systems for forecasting can be proactively used to methodically plan operations, logistics, and administrative requirements. To put it simply, imagine a Pakistani terrorist wanting to cross over into India. He has the choice of a visa for India, illegal crossing of a fenced border with Pakistan, or an easy access into Nepal and a walk across the open and porous Nepal border into India. The choice is clear. He does not look any different from an average Indian. So why should my man on the border be suspicious of him? Or even if he is, how would he know for sure in those few minutes of interaction that he is in fact someone entering to endanger national security? The task would be impossible without a strong intelligence network backed with ICT tools. SSB has attempted to keep pace with the growing ICT culture and the force has adapted and evolved accordingly. The major initiatives undertaken so far are connecting units up to the border outpost through wide area network for seamless transmission of data, video and voice. Presently, 68 out of the 100-odd locations of SSB are connected through WAN. The network is being extensively used for video conferencing and various other management information software applications. Personnel information management system has been implemented in our force. Now, having up-to-date information of each employee, including their mobile numbers, is proving to be a great tool in decision-making and dissemination for various tasks related to the force. Centralized payroll software is managing the salaries of the force personnel through central database at force headquarters. Information kiosks have been provided at various units to enable force personnel to access their payslips and service book on WAN. Group SMS facility with the purpose of disseminating information to all the personnel with respect to their pay, training avenues, achievements, welfare schemes, new initiatives, circular, etc. We have application of ICT in inventory management and in e-recruitment as well. We also use it for intelligence analysis software and e-surveillance. We have an IT training center at Faridabad for imparting IT training to force personnel as well as sister agencies. In addition, IT training is an integral part of basic training courses for all ranks, including constables, in our force today. A bit about the road ahead. Our future initiative in the IT field includes implementation of the vision of Digital India by focusing on 3 key areas: digital infrastructure as utility to every citizen, governance and services on demand, and digital improvement of citizens. We are also working on implementation of ICT roadmap so as to enable an IT secured environment for real-time information access and availability across locations to improve operational planning of our force, enhance management of inventory, human resources and finances for informed decision making in an integrated and comprehensive manner. The importance of the IT infrastructure gains all the more significance since most of the information about a force and its personnel and deployment is available through our application software. The vulnerability of fast evolving ICT infrastructure to natural and man-made disasters can result in a cascading effect on our national security and governance. Due care has been taken while selecting the media and hardware for WAN. We are also working on the issue in conjunction with National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. However, as cyber techniques are continuously evolving, it has become more challenging for government and corporate world to keep abreast. Therefore, we need to take preventive and proactive measures. It may not completely eliminate cyber threats, but it can certainly make cyberspace a much safer place. To conclude, आज के दिन यदि जंगल में मोर नाचा तो वर्चुअली देखने वाले लोग जरूर होंगे, लेकिन वो देखने वाले कौन होंगे? ये मोर अर्थात नेशनल बर्ड की सुरक्षा को दृष्टिगत रखते हुए निर्णय लिया जाएगा. Success is where opportunity meets preparation. We need to prepare well so that we can capitalize on the opportunity when it does arise, and it most definitely will. Thank you for inviting me to speak at this Secure IT 2015, and I wish the organizers and participants a fruitful day of deliberations. Anu Bhadra Pitvu Yantu Vishwathar, let noble thoughts come to us from all sides. This is from Rig Veda. I would welcome actionable ideas to increase efficiency and effectiveness in our functioning, and also hope that some of you would come forward to contribute towards the training and upgradation of our men on the borders. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for this inspiring address, which reflects how Sashastra Seema Bal is looking forward to move towards vision as well as Indian values. Thank you very much, and with that, now I invite next speaker, Shri Shambhu Singh. He is Joint Secretary, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, for an address. Sir, please. A round of applause for Mr. Singh.
Good morning, Mr. Narayanan, Mr. Chandrasekhar, Mr. Sharma, ladies and gentlemen present in this room. Well, to be very honest, being a novice in terms of technology, I have been avoiding Ravi's invitation to come and talk here. But this time, he's insisted that you come and talk about what you have been dealing with in the Ministry of Home Affairs. Last 3 years, I have been occupied with the subject of privacy and the vast world of e-governance, or rather the electronic world itself. And over the period of time, I have come to realize that even with government programs, not to talk of the World Wide Web otherwise, even with government programs and our actions in day-to-day life, our activities are being monitored or can be monitored from minute to minute. Government has its schemes like CCTNS, RSYB, DNA profiling, reproductive rights of women, privileged communications, and brain mapping. And most of that is being implemented through ICT platforms. Increased collection of citizen data by the government and by the private sector has been giving rise to the privacy concerns. Now imagine a situation wherein somebody is after you and you are traveling, you are trying to get away. You pass through a toll gate and swipe a card and your presence is recorded there. You make an ATM transaction, your presence is recorded there. So 24 hours, if there is somebody looking at you, you are under surveillance. Further information is being collected, which is mandatory in nature. For example, data related to health, travel, taxes, religion, education, financial status, employment, disability, living situation, welfare status, citizenship status, marriage status, crime record, everything is being collected. So how intrusive all these can be in our lives on a daily basis is only a matter of imagination. Now, as has already been talked about by Mr. Sharma and subsequent Mr. Ramsevak Sharma and subsequently by Mr. B.D. Sharma, the global data flow today is no longer a file initiated by somebody 30 years ago through an individual action for a point-to-point transfer. Now it's instant. And the moment you start a transaction, multiple data flows are taking place. And these are all simultaneous. Be it the web, online social networking, search engines, and cloud computing. Such ubiquitous data transfers over the internet and enhanced economic importance of data processing with direct involvement of individuals in trans-border data flows. While this is exposing individuals to more privacy risks, it is also challenging the businesses. They are collecting the data of others. They are also having their own data. And they are responsible. What do they do with that data? How do they secure that data? And whether they let it be misused by some unscrupulous people. Again, we find that in those situations, such business people who are accountable for data collection and its use they themselves find it more important than the capital and labor today, because information is the key in as far as their business is concerned. The private sector, on the other hand, uses personal data to create new demands, build relationships, for generating revenue from their services. The individuals are putting out their data on the web in returns for useful services at almost no cost, but of course at the risk of being exposed. The majority of global, herein comes the importance of what we are going to talk about now. The majority of global cyberspace and communication networks are mostly built using hardware and software solutions having proprietary closed source code. The realization that the global networking infrastructure built up in the last couple of decades are porous and more frighteningly can even possibly be not under the control of the user and can be shut down remotely are possibilities which are now increasingly clear to the entire global cyber security establishment. I need not get into the details of Stuxnet and all, but we know how damages can be done to the national assets. Now, if we think of the Snowden revelations and the surveillance activities carried out by the intelligence agencies, I, for one, I was using a Vodafone earlier. I immediately switched over to an Indian service provider because I thought if an Indian trawls through my call details, it's better rather than MI5 or 6 doing it. Now, for other nation states, the information leak so far has revealed that the holier-than-thou Western MNCs and their technologies have been leveraged for a competitive advantage over economic and diplomatic gains by the US intelligence apparatus. The dangers to national security as well as individual liberties from the big data stored on the server farms of the giant MNCs are but the tip of the iceberg. Thus, large-scale snooping by Western nations, directly through their intelligence agencies and indirectly through the multinational corporations controlled and or paid by them. All of us in the room here perhaps know about the In-Q-Tel. That is one of the examples. There are so many other examples. Now, this has added a new and urgent dimension to the requirement of enumerating policies and enacting laws on privacy for the individual as well as improving the security of the nation vis-a-vis cyber attacks. As of today, India doesn't have any comprehensive policy. The high courts and Supreme Courts have in various cases taken a stand that let the situation evolve from case to case and then let a practical kind of policy take shape in its natural course. We don't even have a national policy on governing of the data which are being collected for utilization and sharing of that data, which impede into the citizen's private life. And currently, there is no overarching policy governing the collection of data and use of information by the government. This has led to ambiguity over who is allowed to collect data, what data can be collected, and what are the rights of the individual, and how the right to privacy will be protected. The extent of personal information being held by various service providers, and especially the enhanced potential for convergence that this digitization carries with it, is a matter that raises issues about privacy. There are substantial justifications for the right to privacy, yet there are certain violations of privacy that I, as an individual, am willing to suffer in order to maintain a proper balance between the right to privacy and the security. For citizens to accept and consent to certain forms of surveillance, that is to say its positive phase, the state should be accountable for its actions. It cannot be left with an unfettered discretion to determine why and where it carries out surveillance on and on behalf of its citizens without some form of what you could say legal responsibility. Now, in this changed paradigm, the government and the civil society need to debate and build legal regimes and practices which are transparent and which inspire trust. However, none of the above will have any meaning. And here I would like to emphasize, when our entire public cyber infrastructure is inherently insecure and open to snooping. To ensure our national security and provide an acceptable level of privacy for our citizens, it is essential that national critical ICT infrastructure is based on verifiable open source protocols which are entirely under our control. Enabling government policies and legislations for promoting indigenous infrastructure, data storage of the Indian population and under Indian national jurisdiction are the need of the hour, and herein lies the opportunity for Make in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for putting up a perspective of Government of India in terms of security. Now, it's time to invite for the keynote address of the day, the person who has kind of initiated e-governance in the country. I would like to invite Mr. R. Chandrasekhar, President, NASSCOM. Please invite him, please welcome him with a round of applause.
Mr. Narayanan, Mr. Shambhu Singh, Mr. Banshidhar Sharma, and distinguished delegates to the Secure IT Conference 2015. I think all the speakers earlier, starting with the IT Secretary, have underlined both the importance and the relevance of security in the larger ICT context in the country and in the world today. And I think it is very clear from what has been said and from all that is known today that not only has ICT become pervasive in our lives and in every sphere of activity, whether it is business activity or government activity or personal activity or leisure activity, in every aspect ICT has pervaded our lives and will continue to do so, and let's also be very clear about that. It's going to continue to do so. And like every gift of modern technology, it has made life infinitely easier, infinitely better, and yet also brought along with it a set of new problems and new dimensions which have made it a mixed blessing. And so is the case with technology, with ICT as well. And this concern has been growing over the last few years. But as a person who has been associated with ICT, e-governance, and some of these issues of security over the years, I must say that in the earlier years, the discussion was mostly among professionals, and the conversation therefore was of, by, and for professionals. But today the situation is different. And as the most potent symbol of why it is different, I would like to refer to what happened on the 1st of March, where NASSCOM had hosted an event to reflect on the incredible 25-year journey of the Indian IT industry and NASSCOM, and also to look ahead at the opportunities and the challenges and what the future holds for this industry globally, and in particular what implications and impact this could have within the country, especially as the government embarks on an ambitious plan of Digital India, which is being led by none less than the Prime Minister himself from the front. And at this event, the Prime Minister spoke, in fact, for quite some time, at great length, on his dreams and aspirations in this sector. But what was significant was that the single area on which he spent the largest amount of time within the larger framework of ICT was on security, cyber security. And when the head of government spends the large amount of time, in fact the largest amount of time of any topic on cyber security, then you know that this is no longer an issue of technology people. It's an issue which has risen to the top for a variety of reasons, and many of these reasons have been referred to, because I think Mr. Arish Sharma spoke quite eloquently about how the nature of people who were the cause of problems in cybersecurity has been changing over the years. But today it's a combination of, or it's a mix, I would say, not a combination, but a mix, a milieu, which includes nations, it includes state players, it includes non-state actors, it includes petty criminals, it includes gangs, and it includes quite often youngsters having a lot of fun, but in the process it's a very slippery slope and it could drift in any direction. So the result is that, and all of these are interacting with each other, and it's very difficult sometimes to separate the two. And just as in the real world, in the physical world, states use terrorist organizations use criminals, and criminals use amateurs as their pawns. So also in this space, all of these people are active. But to come back to the point, today it is escalated to a point where the future of countries depends on how well they use technology. And India, and especially under the present government, has made it an article of faith that technology will be the determinant of our economic progress. And equally, that the biggest concern in that context is security and how it can be a spanner in the works. And as we move towards Digital India, and greater parts of government, of the economy, of the banking system, and even other social sector areas like healthcare, education, move into a digital mode. And a lot of the business moves in that mode, like the e-commerce that we are seeing, a lot of the potential transactions that are getting into that space, a lot of the social interactions thanks to the social media which are coming in. All of these are getting into that space. Infrastructure increasingly is being run on this medium, whether it is airports or power sector or traffic management, etc. So not just the vulnerabilities increase or the areas in which these threats can surface increases, but the damage which can be caused
is now becoming absolutely huge. India recently, in the last year, the number of people accessing the internet through mobile crossed the number of people accessing it through traditional means. India became the second largest base for internet users in the world, overtaking the US as well. And the interesting part in this is that even if the access is through the mobile, which is the common mode within India, the security threats are no less and in fact are as severe. And the challenge therefore is, how do we derive the maximum benefit from this technology and how can we contain some of these concerns? From the NASSCOM, actually, from the industry, in fact, there has been a focus on security from some time ago. And these concerns came up in the past when the industry faced certain challenges with regard to the security of information emanating from countries which were getting their work done in India. And the Data Security Council of India was set up in that context to look at some of these issues and focus on areas of standards and how the industry could undertake a process of voluntary compliance, essentially in order to give the level of comfort to the client companies and the countries from which the data was originating, that it was safe and secure. And there are a number of different areas which have been identified for the activity. And I'll just mention a few of them which have been the focus of effort in the Data Security Council. The standards for critical information infrastructure protection, and that becomes particularly important in the context of infrastructure in general as well as information infrastructure in particular. A lot of these issues involve policy concerns, and I will touch upon them a little more, and therefore it is important to look at some of these policies and actually have a center for research into issues of cyber policy which are impacting the world and India. Then looking at product companies and how we can encourage indigenous development. And this becomes particularly important because so long as the country continues to be completely dependent on technologies emanating from elsewhere with absolutely no IP or no products of its own in this area, then at some level the vulnerabilities would remain high. But it's interesting that as today the product and startup ecosystem is become the bright new feature of the Indian IT industry, security has become a major area where a number of companies are focused, bringing out new kinds of security products, not just for India but for the world market. And last year, in the recognition that NASSCOM provides every year to the top 50 companies, 4 out of the top 10 were actually in the area of security. So that's certainly a heartening feature. Then the testing and certification of products is another major area where competencies are needed, and this became particularly evident in the imbroglio over the telecom security in the last few years, last 2-3 years, when concerns over telecom security led to the need for mandatory testing, which in turn exposed the lack of capability of testing within the country and the need to build that up. In a country where the private sector capabilities in IT account for an overwhelming percentage of the capabilities, we have today more than 3 million people working in the IT sector, in the private sector, and we probably have around 10,000 people who are technically qualified working in this area in the public sector and in the government. So it's absolutely a no-brainer that if we want
real capacity to be built, if we want real capability to be built, then it has to be done through the private sector. In fact, one of the very interesting paradoxes that we have today is we have an IT industry which is established itself globally, which commands a 55% share globally in the global market, a 55% share in the global sourcing industry in ICT. And yet, we are not a significant player in the security space. And that's a very paradoxical situation and one which needs to be really reflected upon. And that's a point which actually even the Prime Minister had made and in fact posed it as a challenge to the industry, saying, how do we position India as a force for enhancing cybersecurity in cyberspace? How do we ensure that India and the Indian IT industry becomes a force in that direction, even as the security concerns and the security threats keep mounting? And I'll come to some of the issues there and what we are doing about them. Security workforce development is another major area. And this is one area where, in fact, NASSCOM, as the Sector Skills Council of the ICT, has focused upon this area. And I would like to share with you some of the details of what is being planned in that area, where we have prepared a plan, and this is currently at an advanced stage of discussions with the National Skill Development Council in the context of the Skill India initiative. And what is proposed here is that in the first year, 31 job roles in the security space have been identified at various levels, the entry level, middle level and senior levels, across 7 different tracks covering forensics, testing, business continuity plans, operations management, application security, risk and audit compliance, and security architecture development. And as a part of this program, which also covers telecom in its ambit, in collaboration with the Telecom Skill Development Council, about 200 to 500 faculty members would get created over the next 1 year, and about 10,000 people would get trained. These numbers are actually still extremely small when you consider the fact that there are some countries, including some large neighboring countries, who are training a very large number of people, running into tens of thousands and maybe even hundreds of thousands of people in various aspects of such security. And of course, when the training is with regard to security, the manner in which it is used for good or for bad lies in the hands of the people who have been trained. So a lot of capability has also been built up on cyber forensics, and in fact the Data Security Council today is engaged in training law enforcement agencies in several states. Now surveillance and interception is another important issue which today has become a major global issue. Countries are maintaining surveillance and undertaking interception of communications for lawful purposes. The laws of almost every country provide for some provisions, and so is the case in India. But it's not only countries which are maintaining such surveillance over criminal players. Countries are also maintaining surveillance over other countries, and therefore it has become a tool of both espionage and a variety of other tools of international diplomacy, and indeed one may even say international intrigue. So this has led to a number of different concerns, and many countries have now started looking at it, saying that, how do we ensure that we are safe from such intrusive efforts by other countries? Now, as a country in India, we have a very different set of concerns as well as constraints. The first is that while we have similar concerns that other countries may be maintaining surveillance over communications within the country, whether they are providers of telecommunication equipment or they are providers of technology or they are through OTT players or through social media providers. The fact is that these concerns cannot disappear, and many countries are resorting to certain steps like the localization of the data. This is, for example, a response that we have seen in Europe, particularly post the Snowden revelations, where there have been sections of the administration in Europe which have said that our concerns on privacy and security lead us to insist on data localization so that the data is under our control. Now, any technical person would know that you can put the server in your bedroom and put your arms around it, but as long as it is connected, that doesn't enhance your security at all. And when you take into account the fact that in addition to these efforts to localize the data, there are also restrictions on the movement of skilled personnel. Imagine what happens when you locate the data locally and then don't have even skilled personnel to operate the systems. At the end of the day, the country ends up being less secure. For the Indian IT industry, it's also bad news because that means that the ability to move data around as the current business models enable, or as the current business models have evolved, becomes less likely. And the whole idea of putting restrictions on the flow of technology, on the flow of data, and on the flow of skilled personnel mitigates against the whole foundation and the basis on which the internet is managed. Internet is not based on resources being confined to certain areas or geographies. But a lot of these, I would say, half-baked efforts stem from the fact that the laws of a country apply only within the physical borders of the country, whereas the internet has no such boundaries. And therefore, when sovereign nations or when law enforcement agencies try to impose whatever the legal mandate allows them to do, and they come across barriers, then they find that since the transaction in a digital sense goes beyond the borders of the country, the server may be in some other country, the person who has initiated the transaction may be in a third country, and in between it may pass through several other countries as well. From a legal standpoint, therefore, it's a complete mess, and it's a extremely intricate situation, and the existence of treaties on a bilateral basis, mutual legal assistance treaties, MLATs as they are called, have helped to some extent, but certainly have not been a remedy, and certainly not a solution when it comes to providing immediate responses, because most of the time a law enforcement agency would like the response to happen within minutes or hours, whereas a treaty between two countries at the level of the governments goes through all the diplomatic channels, and it can take such a long time that it's practically irrelevant. So all of these, I think, have made the situation extremely complex. But we come back to the central question, which is how do you ensure that the capability that India has developed is channelized to making our country more secure, and given that we have a significant role across the globe in making cyberspace across the world more secure. I've mentioned about our first effort, which is to enhance the skills in this area and to build up the skill base within the country. The other aspect is that in the area of security, it's not just the tools and technologies alone which are important, but just as in the physical world, whenever we go out, we know that there are some threats or some hazards. That doesn't prevent us from going out or crossing the road or driving in a car or going on a highway, even though we know that there are some risks involved, but as long as you take the precautions. And just as in the physical world, there is nothing like complete security. And it was John F. Kennedy who famously said that the day any man decides that his life is worth less than mine, I am a dead person. Basically, it meant that if somebody is willing to take every possible risk to kill somebody else, then he may well succeed. And we've seen many instances of that even in our own subcontinent in the last few decades. So the point is that since there is nothing like perfect security, all security operates on the principle of providing it to the extent required and based on the nature of the threat and the value of what is being protected. So similarly, even within the country, the arrangements have to be focused based on whatever are critical elements or critical infrastructure or critical parts of our whole economy. Those will need to be strengthened to much greater level and through special arrangements. Whereas outside of that, when it comes to, for example, citizens and casual users being given protection, individual precautions and individual actions also become important. And in all of security, practice is as important as the technology. And that's what repeatedly has been seen in all the projects. Therefore, building awareness is an extremely important part of it, so that everybody knows what is needed to protect themselves, what are the steps that they can take, and where such support will be available. Once again, we heard some of the arrangements that the government and in this program that are being provided. And I think we are seeing increasingly different kinds of services being provided by private agencies. As we go into the certain aspects of Digital India, for example, the smart cities, the use of technology in a positive way to ensure security, not just in cyberspace but in physical space, is becoming a critical aspect of using technology. And we've seen a number of possible solutions to make cities safer in terms of using technology, use of cameras, use of connected devices, and with the spread of the Internet of Things and devices spread across, then the ability to maintain surveillance is increasing, and the capability to track offenders and maybe even prevent offences would increase, as also the concerns over intrusion and individual citizens' privacy. These pose technical, legal and ethical issues, and as we look at issues of security, all of these are areas which need to be addressed and need to be preceded by informed debate by people who are fully aware of these of the various facets of these areas. And I think it is in this context that I would like to compliment ILETS for having organized this event. This is the sixth in the series, and given the growing importance of security, I'm sure that this is going to grow from strength to strength. And I do hope that this forum will provide the opportunity to not only discuss all these aspects, but help in coming up with steps and remedies, and also provide at least certain directions for action by agencies, whether they are government agencies, whether they are private sector agencies, or whether they are citizens, or whether they are professionals in this field. For all of these stakeholders, I think these discussions are important. Let us all be clear that these are extremely complex issues. There are no simple remedies where you can just snap your fingers and say do this and you are safe, and therefore the importance of this and forums like this. So let me end by once again complimenting ELETS on having organized this event, and I do hope that the deliberations would be useful and productive and lead to further suggestions in terms of how we can enhance our own security and that of the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Your address, as always,